All the library girlies won't be surprised when I say this, but the book was much better.
So do you like secrets?
No. I like reveals.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new Prime Video series 56 Days, which I first watched a couple of weeks ago. This is an early review, so I'm going to be talking about a lot of the material indirectly or in a more roundabout way. However, I am eventually going to reach a point in this review where I will tell you more about how similar or dissimilar the book and series are to one another. So if you have read the book and you haven't watched the series, or the other way around, you might be getting indirectly spoiled about what is or is not in the other version of that story. But we're not there yet, I will let you know. Before I get into talking more about the series, I'm going to be talking about the book as well as multiple other books by the author, Catherine Ryan Howard. When I first got an email about having the screeners for this series, I read that it was an adaptation of a book. Now, if you are new here and you don't already know, for about a year and a half now, I have been covering source material on a more regular basis. I do this so that I can research and study the adaptation process, but also to promote libraries. Almost all of the videos I have done about a particular source material book, or a review in which I also discuss the source material, those books have been library books. At the time of recording this video, I have read over 20 books in 2026, and all of those have either been library books or ebooks, depending on which version of that book was available. I got 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard because I wanted to read that first before I would watch my screeners of the series. The book premise reads, no one even knew they were together. Now, one of them is dead. 56 days ago, Ciara and Oliver meet in a supermarket queue in Dublin and start dating the same week COVID-19 reaches Irish shores. 35 days ago, when lockdown threatens to keep them apart, Oliver suggests they move in together. Ciara sees a unique opportunity for a relationship to flourish without the scrutiny of family and friends. Oliver sees a chance to hide who and what he really is. Today, detectives arrive at Oliver's apartment to discover a decomposing body inside. Can they determine what really happened? Or has lockdown created an opportunity for someone to commit the perfect crime? What I really liked about the format of the 56 Days book is that the chapters jump around to different times. I will have an image on screen of what the list of the first few chapters look like, just so that you can see some of how this story jumps around. As such, the readers are essentially being given puzzle pieces that will gradually connect to form a complete picture. It's a bit like doing a jigsaw puzzle without knowing the picture of what's on the box. So you don't fully know what you're looking at and all of what's going on until you reach the end of the story. This makes for a more effective mystery, and there was something really enticing about having secrets dangled in front of you and having to continue reading to learn exactly what those secrets are. There's also a sense of catharsis once you get to the end, and you can get all of the answers and achieve a sense of closure and completion. Following 56 Days the book, I went and read another book by Catherine Ryan Howard, and one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I had read most of her mystery books. The only one I haven't read is Burn After Reading, which was published in 2025. I did submit a request in my local library for them to get a copy of that book and add it to their collection. Every time I'm there to pick up new books or return ones that I have finished, I ask them if it is available at a different library that they can borrow it from. That is a thing that libraries can do, yet another reason you should get a library card. Catherine Ryan Howard also has a new book releasing this year, in 2026, called Buyer Beware. Presumably, I will read that too. Now, one small note I would make about these books is that none of these books are the types of books that I would have an interest in rereading, recreationally speaking. Part of what was enticing about reading them was not knowing what was going to happen, and reading them to find that out. Now that I know what's really going on, there's not much else in them to incentivize me to reread them. Yet another reason why libraries are great. I can read a book one time and then move on to a completely different mystery or some other story altogether. On screen of this video, I'm going to show you a list of Catherine Ryan Howard's books in their sequential publishing order, and I'm also going to show you a list of the order that I read the books, just so you can have all of that context before I present to you my ranking, because who doesn't love a good ranking? In last place, we have The Trap. I wouldn't normally say something like this because, as I've already stated, the thing that is enticing about reading these books is not knowing what's going to happen. However, the main glaring issue of why I liked this book, The Trap, the least out of all of the books that I read from her, is that the ending is unresolved. Part of what's satisfying about finishing these books is that you get answers to the questions and there's usually a sense of closure. If you're going to release this many books in this many years, it's obviously better in the long run to not do the same thing every time. However, this particular choice to end the story in that way is ultimately what made me like it the least. I'm not going to overly explain the premise of each of these books, partially because of limited time, but also because this is first and foremost a video about 56 days, so some of my feedback is going to be more abbreviated. My second to last on my ranking is Distress Signals, and my third to last is The Nothing Man. Distress Signals, I'm not showing you the front of the book because this was borrowed from a different library, so there is a sticker on the front with personal information that I want to keep private. The Nothing Man I read as an ebook, so I don't have a physical copy to hold up. All three of these books that are in the lowest chunk of my Catherine Ryan Howard ranking lean into darker subject matter, and the emotional and psychological experience of reading them was such that it really felt as though they were crime books first and mystery books second. The violence and darkness was overpowering everything else. Another thing I would note is that multiple books above this on my ranking lean into more of a non-linear structure where you jump around, and that was more intellectually engaging because it felt like a puzzle. When you are reading the books of hers where you follow through things in a linear timeline structure, often through male POVs, and more specifically, male POVs where it's violent, dangerous, misogynistic men, that's just not really what I was interested in when I started reading through more of these books. Moving up on my ranking, we have The Liar's Girl. This is her second book, sequentially speaking. The events of this book are mentioned in passing in multiple other books of hers which were published after this. This is not necessarily required reading. You can still follow those other books as isolated stories, but I did want to mention this detail because it happened multiple times, and it just so happened that this was the second Catherine Ryan Howard book I had read after 56 Days, so it ended up working out to where I was able to recognize the references to this book each time they came up again. Most of the chapters in this book are from the point of view of the protagonist, who is a woman named Allison, and the chapters jump around from Allison now to Allison then. So you are following her in the present, but there is something looming over her about whatever it was that happened in the past, so you have to keep reading to get the bigger picture of what exactly happened all the way back then. Above The Liar's Girl, we have 56 Days. As I already briefly mentioned, this was a good introduction to her writing, and the format of jumping around to different chapters, which coincide with various days ago, enhanced the mystery and suspense of what was really going on in the story. But the top of my list, I go back and forth about which book I would rank as first because it depends on what I'm going off of to decide. One of the books is Rewind, and this is probably the most technically impressive because of how many moving parts there are to the story and the mystery. There are more characters that are involved in the larger narrative, and you're also jumping around in the story's timeline, which, of course, further enhances the mystery. But runtime, out of all of Catherine Ryan Howard's books, is the one that I would single out as the one that needs to be adapted. It also feels like the one that would be easiest to pitch for a film adaptation, because the film industry loves to be self-referential. So you have a mystery thriller about making a movie and things going awry. There are other things about what eventually gets revealed that I feel would very easily resonate with the audience at large. I won't say too much because of spoilers, but for this book, I am going to read the plot description. The project, final draft, a psychological horror being filmed at a house deep in a forest, miles from anywhere in the wintry wilds of West Cork. The lead, former soap star Adele Rafferty, has stepped in to replace the original actress at the very last minute. She can't help but hope that this opportunity will be her big break, and she knows she was lucky to get it after what happened the last time she was on a set. The problem? Something isn't quite right about Final Draft. When the strange goings-on in the script start to happen on set too, Adele begins to fear that the real horror lies off the page. Now, admittedly, I do have a bias towards preferring films, so the premise of this involving trying to make a film, chasing dreams of working in show business, it was much easier for this book to resonate with me than the others.
What do you got here? Body in a bathtub.
Now we can begin to segue into talking about this television series adaptation of 56 Days. Catherine Ryan Howard is an Irish author. All of these books are first and foremost set in Ireland. Occasionally, they might involve other locations, but Ireland is always the central location. Whether you are in Dublin or Cork, the more precise location may vary, but it's always Ireland. Automatically, that adds a different perspective and texture to these stories that sets things apart if you're often reading or watching entertainment media that is usually based in the States. Before I begin to go into more of the specifics, I will simply introduce the series and my review of it by saying 56 Days is devoid of the intrigue and tension of its source material. Mystery and suspense is regularly sidelined in favor of bland eroticism and generic melodrama. The show is no longer set in Ireland, and it's not taking place during the shutdown, lockdown time period. The specificity of those things in the book added something distinct to the mystery. Ireland is not just one place, and by that I mean that you can have some busier cities and you might have smaller towns, rural country locations, but Ireland overall is a smaller country in regards to its size as well as the population. That does something different to the story compared to watching yet another disposable direct-to-streaming crime thriller series that is here today and forgotten tomorrow. And the fact that the book has these two characters deciding to go into lockdown together, be in each other's bubble, when they haven't been dating for very long, there's a different sense of being isolated from others and feeling almost trapped in this bubble with someone. That adds to the atmosphere, mood, and tone in a way that really suits the genre. Whereas on the show, they don't have that tension. These characters have a lot more freedom to come and go as they please. Moreover, the series takes an approach of constantly trying to throw out some new dramatic thing in a way that comes across like appealing to viewers with short attention spans. It's as if giving the audience a moment to breathe, to sit in something more quiet and introspective, something that asks questions and makes you wait for longer to get those answers, is somehow the wrong thing to do because you believe that your audience will get bored and click off. One example of this is what they do with the cops that are investigating the case of whomever it was that was found in the bathtub, and that's not a spoiler for me to say because it's in the most basic premise of the book. A body was found. Readers or viewers do not know who that is when they begin the story in either form. In the book, whenever they begin a chapter with today, that is going to be focusing on the cops who are investigating. That is all they are doing in the book. An investigation. On the series, there's an entire other subplot being added because of drama those cop characters have. Why is that there? It's drama for the sake of it. Do you think I care about the cops? Ever?
Gotta stop mythologizing the police, for Christ's sake. Come on.
At least in the book, they're a means to an end. They have a functional purpose in the overall story. The readers are gradually fed information about what they're investigating, what they find, what they learn, things that will gradually bring you towards the ending when you get those answers. The show is asking me to get invested in the drama these two have going on that has very little to do with what it is that they're investigating. And guess what? I don't care. Broadly speaking, I will elaborate more on this in a moment, but the series reveals far too much about Ciara and Oliver too soon. When you tell the audience that much that quickly, you have no other choice but to keep throwing out more drama, and it flattens the viewing experience to where you don't have enough peaks and valleys. The drama loses its dramatic impact because you don't give the material or the characters room to breathe. Now I'm going to start to talk in a slightly more specific way about how similar or dissimilar the series is to the book. There are things that are revealed about certain characters in episode 1 of this series, or perhaps just the earlier portion of this series, that do not get revealed until the very end of the book. That is a prime example of how this show is overly dramatizing things too early. That means you have to spend the rest of the series coming up with new drama to happen, ways to up the stakes, outdo the drama that already happened. And broadly speaking, it feels like one of many things wrong with the direct-to-streaming model. You need to be ridiculous and hyperbolic right from episode 1, or else why would the audience care to keep watching through to the next episode? Reveal too much about these two main characters, Ciara and Oliver, from episode 1, and make it overly dramatic and salacious so that you can just fire off as many things as possible in a desperate attempt to make people watch. All peaks, little to no valleys. And this means that the further you get into the streaming series, the less like the book the story becomes. And then you've reached the conclusion. The conclusion, the finale of this new streaming series, is terrible. It's so Hollywood and pedestrian. It rings hollow, it's clunky, I dislike everything about this ending. When I read the 56 Days book, I didn't finish the story and regard it as something that I wanted to read again, but it was a decent mystery. You jumped around to different days of the titular 56 days, or back to today when the cops are investigating. You are building up this tension. You're making me want to know what's really going on, who's in the bathtub, how did they get there, and why. The streaming series is just something dramatic happens, here's something salacious, rinse and repeat that cycle, never managing to be truly effective in building emotional investment in the characters themselves. So then when you insist on having a cliched happy ending on the streaming series, I derive no satisfaction from that as a viewer. It's unearned. It's just a check the boxes, appeal to the lowest common denominator type of product, and I was left entirely underwhelmed. That being said, if I take a step back from the mediocre quality of the series itself on a larger existential or creative level, it wasn't a complete waste of my time, because the series being sent to me was what got me to read the book first, and then I went and read most of the other books afterwards, and now I really want someone in development to do a film adaptation of Runtime. If you put me in a meeting with some studio person who wants to know what book they should buy the rights to next, Runtime. However, you have to keep it Irish. Keep the characters Irish, film it in Ireland. There's already an infrastructure set up for Hollywood productions to go make things happen in Ireland. So regardless of which country is doing the development, keep the adaptation Irish. I want to see the Irish countryside. I want to see Adele Rafferty running through the Irish woods. Let me see this happen on the big screen at the cinema.
Sure, I've my gun ready, Kathleen!
That's a knife.
You have to compensate, Kathleen. Times are hard.